welcome to the Startup Grind.
Our guest tonight is the CEO of Pulse, Amy Buckalter. Please welcome Amy. Thank you, Amy. All right. So Amy is amazing. By the way, please make yourself comfortable, get food, wine, whatever you need. Amy, welcome.
Yes, thank you.
What do you want us to know about Pulse? Give us an update on where you're at with the company and tell us about Pulse.
Well, Pulse, first of all, how many people here know what Pulse is? Did any reading up on it, anything of the like? It's all right, ladies and gentlemen, don't be shy. If you have looked, we know that you want to learn more about it. First of all, Pulse is disruptive innovation for the personal care, healthcare, and beauty space. It is a device and consumable model, much like Nespresso and espresso capsules, but it is specifically engineered with patented technologies for personal care, clean dispensing system, and temperature control mechanism. So it's got all the convenience, it warms, it's clean, it's hygienic, it's hands-free. So no more messy, goopy, unhygienic, and cold, for some formulations, tubes and bottles of formula. We've really elevated bringing personal care into the 21st century with something very chic, very modern, and our first introduction is elevating and transforming personal lubricants. See, nobody was even jarred by that, right? So we're off to a good start tonight. I've been developing the product for 5 years now. It has been a grind. It has been daunting, exciting, challenging, exhilarating, extremely fatiguing, all in one. And we went through extensive beta testing. We launched the product into the market last fall, and we started to see some very nice increases. Then we idled the business for a bit for me to go back out and fundraise, and now we're back in the saddle again.
Great, thank you. What's been the most surprising thing about your journey so far?
Wow, every day there's a surprise.
Well, fair.
The most surprising. I think that the most surprising for me, having been a very structured professional, is you must learn to live in ambiguity. And it took me 2 years to get somewhat comfortable in it. You know, my office has got stuff everywhere, whiteboards on every wall. You go into my home and it's very disciplined and very put together, just so it balances me when I get home. But I think I didn't realize the ambiguity level would be just constant. And it still is. I don't think it'll end until we get sold.
Okay. Can we get a demo?
Sure. You want to hold this?
Sure.
Okay. So this is Pulse. Let me turn that off. You can see she's nice and discreet. She's very Apple-esque looking. In fact, it's kind of interesting, a little tangent, that when I was in New York last week, I got an introduction through one of my investors to Andrea Young, who is the ex-CEO of Avon, and she sits on the Apple board. And she had just come back from meetings. Of course, I walked into her office, and exciting and daunting all at one time. And of course, I had the Pulse packaging with me. It's very Apple-esque. You unpack it, the product, and her eyes just, big as saucers. So it got that validation. That was nice. So there's a lot of complexity on the inside with mechanics and electronics and firmware, but there's only three interfaces that the consumer, very Apple-esque, needs to worry about or think about. So one is just to kind of set your mood, and there's lighting in the back. So you can just tap on, it's capacitive, or tap off. Tap on, and if you hold it, it will cycle through 6 different colors. and you can stop on whatever color you'd like, and we've actually named them places you'd like to be intimate. So sunrise, sunset, ocean, that was meadow. This is candle, no matches needed. And linen for our white. And you can also dim it and set your mood. So that's just sort of a separate feature that everybody's having a lot of fun with. Then, in the front, on the nose, open the pod chamber. And you can see the lighting went off underneath, and just the pod chamber is lit so you can find whatever you want at whatever time of day or night if you're looking to insert your pod. Then you would take your cap off your pod. Looks like a lipstick, right? Very chic, cosmetic-like. No crappy tubes or bottles. And you would just pop off the top and insert your pod. Simply close the pod door, tap on the top, and it's starting to pulse. And as it's pulsing, that means it is starting the warming mechanism. And it also engages dispensing. So if anybody's in a hurry, can't wait, you can just insert your hand, breaking the invisible beam, and you'll get a nice, pre-measured, generous serving of lubricant. Now I want to talk about the lubes just for a second, because when we started this, thank you, Riveter. When we began this desire to change the entire delivery system, and we didn't know whether or not we were going to be private labeling somebody's lubes. Sorry, thank you.
You're welcome.
Private labeling somebody's lubes. We were going to do a Keurig model, and we were going to license the lubricants. And on my board, I've got a naturopathic physician that I've known for 20 years. She's amazing. She's got a background in chemistry. She has a specific focus on women's health, really smart. And there was nothing in the market we felt would align with the elevation of this new technology. All the major brands, KY, Astroglide, Trojan, their water bases are just steeped with chemicals. Harmful chemicals for women. Glycerin, paraben, petrochemicals. They change your pH. They cause BV and yeast infections and all sorts of yucky things. And for you men, if you've never had a yeast infection, which I'm sure you haven't, it's not a lot of fun. So, nobody's laughing. Men are not laughing. Okay. All right. We'll get serious. So we then looked at the naturals and we looked at the organics. And yes, they have a much better ingredient profile. But the user experience is still very poor for 99.9% of them. They're sticky, they're gummy, they're mucousy, they smell like a candle factory. They're just not clean, spa-like, elevated. So we decided to go through the process, which was quite challenging, to develop our own best-in-class lubricants and having to go through an entire FDA clearance, because personal lubricants are a Class 2 medical device. So what we've created with this, and it took us 3 years to develop and go through our filing and get granted clearance, we've developed 2 of the best lubricants on the market today. We have a silicone base called Aloe with aloe and vitamin E, and we have a natural and all-natural water base. We're the only manufacturer in the business that's used and using a pure chia extract for superior hydration. Both of these formulas are not only no parabens, no glycerins, no petrochemicals, no harsh preservatives. We put them through an extra test outside of the FDA, and they're both 100% hypoallergenic. So they are absolutely phenomenal. And there's another word which is kind of complicated, but it's called osmolality, but it's all about, does it hydrate or dehydrate you? Now you're using a lubricant because you need hydration, right? You're needing more moisture, more lubrication. And many of the larger companies, in fact all of them, these chemicals they're using, they change that osmolality and they make them extremely dehydrating. So much like any of you that have ever used Carmex on your lips with a menthol and you have to keep reapplying it because they're drying out your lips, the same is true with many of these lubricants. And every single major manufacturer has now created a warming lubricant because warming sounds so wonderful, which it is. And we've developed something that will safely warm your lubricants. But they, again, add chemicals. And those chemicals, again, change the pH and the osmolality where some are over 10,000 on a measurement scale. The World Health Organization suggests less than 1,200 to be safe because if it's too dehydrating, it'll dehydrate your tissues. They start to rip. You can be more susceptible to an STD or an STI. Optimal is 380. This is a case where less is better. Our H2O is 301. It's absolutely amazing. So that's a little story about that. So this has been warming up, and maybe you want to.
Oh. It's pretty hot. I'm impressed. Thank you.
So that was kind of an interesting set of firmware changes we actually had to make. And when we go to the next iteration, there'll be more adjustment in it, but we had to figure out what was the most ideal. Formulations have different viscosities, and therefore they heat some to higher temperatures, or they come out warmer, they lose their heat faster, or the reverse. So we had to find one that seemed most ideal and would balance it, and then figure out how warm did it have to be upon release to still stay warm when it got to where you wanted it to go. So that was quite a project.
This is amazing. I'm impressed. So you started with a specific target market and a problem to solve in mind, and you've found that that market is larger than what you thought, and also the people who are attracted to it are different. So I'd love to hear more. And then can you talk more about this being a disruptive technology and dive more into that?
So question number one on the targets. So originally this was developed for the boomer market, perimenopausal, menopausal. That was my personal experience of getting involved with lubricants to begin with. Unlike the millennials now that are so in touch with themselves, their bodies, their health, 43% of millennials are using lubricants. So yes, 40 and up was our number one target audience. But then we discovered with our focus groups, so many millennials and their openness. I mean, we'd sit them around at these tables and have conversations, and Dr. Pepper Schwartz is part of my advisory group, and she was conducting the interviews. Even Pepper was surprised. There's not much that makes Pepper kind of go, aha, as being a sociologist and sexologist for 4 decades or so. And it was just, giving these women a couple glasses of wine, and it was their lubricants, their toys, their vibrators, their collections. It was like their shampoo and their cosmetics. It was just part of their accoutrement. And so that became another segment. And then, of course, we've got what we label as the super users, which are gay men. So there's 3 very strong and fluid, right from younger to older segments. But one really interesting purchasing statistic that we saw as we began selling, where we figured 90% of the purchasers would be women, 60% women and 40% men. And that was fabulous to see for a couple of reasons. And it wasn't 40% of gay men, it was a large majority of straight men. And first, it was nice to see that they were taking care of their relationship. Mama's happy, daddy's happy. And I think especially we saw this a lot in the 40 and up market. And I think there's also another reason for that. We'll get into the little blue pill later. But so we also had a little discovery in talking to some of these women in couples that, oh yeah, my husband and I, or my boyfriend and I, we love this, and it has really changed our relationship, but you know, we're going through more pots because my husband likes using it on his own. So, okay, there's always a new market to be found, and we're going to tap into all of them.
Can you talk more about those markets, even outside of the personal lubricant?
So that's really on the disruptive innovation. As we began to develop the technology, and to kind of backpedal a little bit, before I even got into this, jumped in with both feet, whether it was myself and my friends starting to talk about their experiences with lubricants and being very dissatisfied, I hired a PhD to talk to 300 to 400 women and wanted to really understand were their needs being met or not met. And to a person, I mean, for me, it was about the cold. Whether it's at a wonderful intimate moment, it becomes a buzzkill, or ladies, you know what it's like, you go in for your exam, and I mean, it's not your favorite appointment of the year, and now you're in the stirrups, and now you've got this cold lubricant. Really? Can't you warm that up? So, that whole piece was the impetus, and what we found from this research was it was about the dispensing, the mess, the lack of control through tubes and bottles. I'm seeing head shaking, yes. It was the lack of hygiene. It was all the crap that collects around the rims of the bottles and tubes and harbors germs as it's sitting in your drawer or your cabinet, because it does. And then there was the ingredient profile. As people are getting more demanding about their foods they're eating, the makeups they're using. This is one very large market. 65% of all women use lubricants. One very large market that has just not really been addressed. So as we were building out the technology of this, and at that point I had built my advisory board already, and have added to that, and I've got 4 investors and advisors that have been with Clarisonic prior to its sale to L'Oreal for over $500 million, and Sonicare that was sold to Philips, including the lead inventor and co-founder, Ken Pilcher. So as we were developing this, it became very clear that this is not only a big opportunity for this segment, but a huge opportunity for really transforming the entire personal care industry. Because whether you are talking about baby lotions and oils that you want to apply, or cosmetics to your face or other facial care, you want it to be clean, hygienic, and temperature controlled. And we've got a huge opportunity. In fact, I'm learning about more of them all the time. I had a plane flight 2 weeks ago, and I'll always strike up a conversation to see if there's any connective tissue next to me, investor or otherwise. And this woman happened to be the chief of dermatology at the VA, and she was a professor of dermatology at UC Davis. And when we started to talk about this and I showed it to her, she was like, oh my God, this would be amazing for wound care. All the little bottles and tubes for wound care and the contamination, this would be perfect. So I said, may I take you to lunch? And that'll be in a couple of weeks. So anyhow, we've got tremendous opportunity.
It's amazing. You've raised over $8 million in fundraising so far. What's been the biggest challenge with explaining what started as a female-inspired product that obviously can benefit everyone to your investors?
The $8 million that's been raised has all been an angel investment. I've gone to no angel groups. I actually had one presentation to an angel group recently, and I realized why I've never gone to an angel group before. We can have separate conversation on that, but I won't bog us down right now. And I have no institutional funding yet at this time, but would love to get some very soon. Initially, so I'm calling them large seeds, and 1 million of that is in working capital that has paid for the parts and inventory. When I would show this to women, and 65% of my investors are women, there were 2 in my initial seed round, and I, first of all, established a $100,000 minimum. And when I had my first seed round and I didn't have the portfolio of investors, or, I didn't swim in the pool of friends and people that were billionaires or multi-millionaires, and so I would say to some friends that if you can introduce me to people within this network, you can come in and invest whatever you'd like in my first seed. So that started things off. So I closed the first round for $1 million to $1.2 million in 8 weeks. And there were a couple of women, I didn't even...
Yeah.
Thank you. There were a couple of women, I didn't even get through my presentation into even the financials. And they said, I'm stroking you a check right now. Boomer women, 50s, early 60s, they get it, and it was an instant, we need this. Once we got to the next phase, of which I've been doing these tranches of up to 5.3 in this second, before this next extension, with women again, it was an immediate, it resonated. With the men, if their wives were at a certain age, it resonated. If it was either a man or a woman that hadn't yet started menopause, wasn't a lubricant user, or it was a younger man, younger meaning, let's say, 40s, it could have been a hard time getting them to, no pun intended, it was a challenging time. This happens in the office all the time, by the way. Beth will attest to it. It was a challenge, and so the best way, in fact, I had one potential investor came in who did not invest, and he said, all the women I know in their 40s, they don't want to have sex anymore. And I'm thinking, well, I didn't want to insult him, and
Sounds like a personal problem.
Uh-huh. And I didn't, I tried to sort of explain what happens when a woman is moving into menopause and the body's changing and painful and blah, blah, blah. So I didn't think of it in that presentation, but in a next presentation, because I really thought long and hard about how am I going to really have a man that doesn't have somebody in his life and hasn't really understood this issue, how is it going to resonate with them? So I went right to erectile dysfunction. And I talked about the little blue pill, and that how this has really changed so many men's lives of getting to a certain phase. It's not as easy as it used to be, but now everything is made much easier with this pill, and of course that little pill has made it a lot more challenging for their women partners. Because initially it was, things aren't going so well, and now it's like, you want what, 4 hours a day? So it's really changed the landscape. And that actually made things a little more, much more, an easier explanation.
Mm-hmm. You have an incredible background and career. What do you think has prepared you the most to take on this amazing startup?
I'm not sure anything prepares any of us for a startup. I mean, this is the hardest role, and I've had some challenging corporate jobs, and nothing is like this. I mean, it's 24/7, you're on. especially as a sole founder, not having a co-founder or two other co-founders. Initially you're raising money, then all of a sudden you've got money and you've got to grow a business and raise money. I mean, the raising money piece never stops, what I've learned. That's hard. But I think being an older founder, starting a business in my 50s, having 30 years of business under my belt, of the failures, the successes, the experiences, the different people, to help round out an EQ and an IQ with it has been very, very helpful for me.
Mm-hmm. Before you assembled your incredible board, how did you determine who you wanted on that, and how has your board helped you maybe skip some steps or get connected better?
That's a great question. Well, I've got two boards. I've got a board of strategic advisors that is really about strategy. And then I've got a board of directors that's about governance. And so I'm going to talk about the board of directors for a second, because they've been most helpful in terms of funding, governance, challenging decisions that require legal input, et cetera. So I've got a representative from the first seed who is my lead investor, and then the representative from my second seed, he became my largest investor. He's in now. He started with $500,000. He's been adding to his position. He's now invested at $1.5 million. And then I made the decision to represent the common shareholders to add an attorney, a litigating attorney, who I knew, and he was sharp, and whether you're looking at agreements, you're developing contracts, we've had some speed bumps with a couple of suppliers. He has been fantastic for governing and guidance and so forth. And then my CFO sits in. Next into that area would be a female, and someone probably out of personal care or e-commerce. But I really, when I started this, the first group that I formed, and this was in the first month of beginning this, I started to look at what roles were necessary, functional roles with really deep experience that would help get us to where we needed to be. Certainly in the product development area, in engineering, formulation science, I had zero. I mean, I spent 25 years building brands in the sporting goods industry, Nike, K2, Burton, et cetera. So I didn't have any of that background. And one by one, I would look at the types of roles I needed. There were many people I knew that I went to speak to. There were a couple I didn't know. I'd put down the criteria of what I needed, and I'd start going through LinkedIn and making phone calls and meeting with people. And they have been invaluable. And even though everybody had their own full-time role, they were so committed to this mission of what we could do. They were so generous with their time, and I paid them in common shares that they felt, okay, this is a big idea. Someday that'll bring in a nice chunk of change. And then once I raised my first round, if I needed somebody for an extended period of time, such as Dr. Lilac Muller to come in and sit in our product development meetings for a 4-hour design review, she got paid. But it wasn't a rate of $400 an hour. She'd give us $100 an hour. So everybody is aligned when they are really committed to making sure that the business is successful. And they have been generous, and everybody that started with me on day one is still with us today.
Okay, I got 2 more questions, and then we're going to open it up to all of you. Who are the top 3 connections, partnerships, brands, whoever, that would really move the needle for your company?
Oprah. Seriously, Oprah. Johnson & Johnson, if they were interested, would be, as we think about the kind of strategic partners that would be a good acquiring partner, Johnson & Johnson would be right up there. So I'm still going to leave Oprah in that group. So I'll say Oprah, because she would set this on fire. Johnson & Johnson as an acquirer. think I would, and it might be QVC.
So
Yeah.
if you have relationships with any of those, feel free to let Amy know. Okay, last
Or
question.
any others that you can think of that you
Fair.
think might benefit. I'm always open and welcome to suggestions. Thank you.
How can we as an audience, and for those of you who are watching or listening later, support you in the business right now?
Well, there's a few ways. I mean, one certainly is, well, I could go on and on, but let's talk about a few of them. One, I'm raising. Like I said, I'm always raising. I'm now raising on the marketing to accelerate marketing. So I'm always interested in angels, super angels, or those that you feel are good VCs that like a seed stage to accelerate. If they're hardware oriented, they are device and consumable oriented, they are lifestyle oriented, and they like billion-dollar growth opportunities. Number two, I would say, please visit us at lovemypulse.com. Check us out. Feel free to purchase, recommend to your friends. We did bring some samples, by the way, of Aloe and H2O for you to take home and try. You will understand why these are the best in the market. And just talk highly of us. Talk us up. That would be helpful.
You'll want to come try the warmer afterwards. All right, we're going to open it up for questions. And let me just say that nothing is off limits. So feel free to ask Amy anything. Oh, it's like a show. Ask Amy anything. Okay, who would like the mic?
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I have a lot of questions. How many questions can I ask?
We'll start with one, but maybe more. Start with one.
Can I ask a very quick one?
Yeah.
And then follow it up by another one? Okay. Can you eat it?
Yes, you can. I mean, you wouldn't want to drink a gallon, right? But yes, and it's vegan too, so have at it.
Wonderful. We'll get our meat elsewhere.
Wait.
So you've built an incredible brand. I've spent 10 years in the design industry, and I love your packaging, the thought to detail and delivery, and the consumer experience just seems outstanding.
Thank you.
From a brand perspective, in starting a consumer-facing brand, what are some of your biggest lessons learned in entering the market, like critical stumbling blocks?
Well, are you talking about this startup, critical stumbling blocks on the branding side?
It could be this startup or any of your brand entry experience.
I think, first of all, I learned a very valuable lesson at Nike that is always in my mind, and that is the consumer decides. And so for all of us that come in with any preconceived ideas of what we want something to be, or a clothing designer that wants to create something that they like, you know, you can create that for a hobby. But if you want to create something for your target, the consumer decides. And so we did a lot of research and testing, even to come up with this design and the package. And if you unpack it, there's multiple layers. I mean, it is very kind of Apple-esque. But here's the lesson, okay? Here's a lesson in this from a branding logistics standpoint. In each one of these, there is there's 4 pods that are packaged with this in your initial Pulse box. So it's a juggling match because we get our pods. These are manufactured in the US. I know you asked a branding question. I'm kind of going in off on a tangent. Is that okay? Okay. We've got formulations that are compounded here. The pods, because they use an airless pump technology, which is only in high-end cosmetics, which keeps them clean, no bacteria forms, which is what we want. Those are only produced in Asia. So they get produced there, they come in here, they get filled, they get assembled. So if there's any kind of sourcing hiccup, manufacturing hiccup, shipping hiccup, then we've got to change out the pods in the box. It's at Amazon, it causes all sorts of problems and money. So we probably should have designed this with just the pulse and put all the pods, even on a sample pack, separately, right? These are some of the learnings that you don't even pick up in market research. They're just learnings along the way. But I do think that the one big lesson is research, research, research. I mean, really understand your consumer well.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Are your margins in the actual lubricant itself, or are they in the pulse container? And then, do you really need the pulse the warmer, or can I just use it without the warmer? I mean, what?
Really great questions, and I was remiss in not covering that, so thank you for asking. We have really mimicked the model of a device and consumable model, very much like Nespresso, which is an end-to-end solution here. But we can also say Keurig. It's the first time ever that a device and consumable model had a device that people were willing to pay a much higher price for to elevate the experience of what was in the pod. And the pod being a fraction of the price. We started off, and I'm going to talk about price for a second, we started off at the price of $249. We're experimenting around $229, $199. Right now it's $199. You might want to get it now. And the pods, in a 6-pack, we actually started at $24.95, and we've now moved it up to $29.95, and we don't know how high we can move it because customers are loving them, and they're willing to pay for them. And there's 9 pre-measured servings in this when it's served via the pulse. But to your question, yes, you can take them on the go. You can just take off the top and dispense. And because it's got an airless pump in it, it stays hygienic and clean. When it moves through the pulse, there is never any formulation that ever touches the inside chamber of the warming and dispensing chamber. We use an inductive heating system for warming, so there's coils in here with firmware. Each one of these pods has a 420 grade stainless steel tubing, and how inductive heating works, it works by magnetism, so we heat from the inside out, makes it very efficient and very clean. And so you can use with or without. If you want to take these on the go because you like the formulation, fantastic. You want it touchless, hands-free, warmed and also clean, and you can change your lightings and set your mood, then you want pulse.
I have one other question.
Yes.
Do they come in colors? Because nothing in my bedroom is white, and so did you think about that?
We did think about that, but as a startup, we have to choose an iconic color. And so much like Clairsonic, Sonicare, Apple, our iconic color. We actually, when we did our research, we came out, we had about 50% white or light and 50% black or charcoal or dark. And we had to choose one or the other. But yes, we will be adding. But back to your question on the margins, I just want to answer quickly. Anytime you do a first-time startup, as anybody knows in hardware, it is the most expensive to produce, and our margins are tight, but much better on the pods, and they will get much better on both. But as a device and consumable system, oh yeah, it's all going to be in the pods. In fact, we have a really luxurious massage oil that we'll be introducing in a pod for holiday. And then we'll be looking at other formulations as well.
I need a microphone. I don't have a projecting voice. She does. Are you 100% e-commerce at this point? And how do you fulfill it? Yeah.
We're 100% e-commerce, ordering off of our site or Amazon. We will look to do some other partnerships. In fact, initially it was let's just start on our site and then add Amazon. I mean, you have to be on Amazon today. You just have to. Because we can understand our customer better. We can test things more. And it also preserves some margin. But we do want to look at some partnerships for some different levels of exposure as we do grow. We are, in terms of delivery and the logistics with shipping, we have a third-party shipper. They're actually out of Salt Lake. They're the same company that actually produces our packaging overseas, and they handle all the logistics. If I could do it again, I would have started in our backyard with a smaller company. But they're a kidder, they're a fulfiller, kidder, very professional. But I would have started it in our backyard.
So one, I hope you're thinking about changing tables and paper cream.
That's next.
Yes. And then the question is, I would love to hear how you guys address kind of the Me Too with the work culture of being able to allow people to be kind of, sexual human beings with this product and like keep, if that comes up at all for you guys in day in, day out.
The Me Too culture part of it?
Just like what's on or off limits so people kind of talk about it at work. Because at other offices, when you talk about it,
Beth is in the back laughing.
Yeah.
Beth has joined me today. She's my everything at the office. I mean, she really keeps everything humming. There's not a lot of us at the office. I mean, we've got a lot of contract, right? But Beth is with me full time and keeps things humming. Nothing is off limits. And we have a lot of discussions, whether it's contractors that are in, our board of directors, our board of advisors. I mean, they are very entertaining conversations, as you can imagine. So nothing's off limits. The only place we do want to elevate the conversation, so it never is like a porn job. It's elevated. It's intimate, but it's elevated. I'll tell you what's been really frustrating for us talking about elevated conversation has been Facebook. Because, they can accept rubles and have Russians come in and just, blow up our democracy. I don't want to get into politics, but, the word vagina, not happening. Anything to do with sexual wellness, we've got to find a way around it. Or they shut us down and we have to call them. I mean, it has made it very, very, very challenging because the Facebook targets their audience. It's the 40 and up. Otherwise, we're on Instagram, right? And that's the younger and other things. But it is very, 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 very frustrating in today's world to have that be the case. Femtech in its own, since 2014, has invested over almost $1.5 billion in startups. Yet, Facebook won't allow the conversation. It's crazy.
Last question? Yes.
How many design iterations did you go through before you came up with this one?
We actually had probably 35, but they were all in 2D graphic. Hang them up on boards, we'd be having discussions, we'd change things. It was only when we went to this look that we went and created a 3D prototype. And everybody just loved the fluidity of the shape, but this has been a hard shape. I mean, it took the automobile industry ages to be able to have rounded hoods and bumpers and so forth. And the same with this. You create the molds for those to get them to harden in that shape. It was a challenge, especially with first round of aluminum tooling before you go to hard tooling. You're in soft tooling. But yeah.
And how quickly did that particular shape come along? in the arc of design?
Very early. And it's, there's two kind of paths of thought on design. You create your technology and you design around it, or you create your design and you hope your technology fits in it. And so when this design started off, and it's still, I mean, it's very discreet. We needed to be a certain size so that if someone did not want this lovely mood light on their night table, they could just simply unplug the back and slide it into the drawer. But it was even smaller. So when I went around with this 3D prototype, it was much smaller. Then we had to start fitting pods into it, a medical device stepper motor, a variety of other things, and it started to widen a little bit and lengthen. And, but everything fit. A little bit larger, but everything fit. Do you like it?
I love it. It's just perfect.
Thank you.
It's so modern, sleek, sophisticated.
Exactly what we were looking for. Thank you. Will it be sitting on your night table soon?
It fit very well.
Okay.
One last question, channeling Mike here. Oh, okay, Lee, go for it.
Oh, did you want to ask?
No, you can go ahead. Yep.
Any like words of wisdom or lessons learned along your journey that you'd like to share with us?
Do you have all night?
I feel like that's a pun. Everything's in a pun today, actually.
Yeah, that was not a pickup line. No. I think I learned a valuable lesson very early on, and it was told to me by a very sage colleague, mentor, person. You know, when you begin your startup, it's your baby. You put a lot of time, your energy, your heart, your soul, your sweat, everything into it. And you go out and you start to raise money, and you want people to love your baby. And so you're going to run into certain investors, and they'll say something, and you'll go back and think about it, or it might piss you off the first couple of times. And the advice was, you can't take it personally. And once I kind of really locked and loaded that thought, it made it much easier. So I think that's one lesson, and just in the fundraising side. I want to talk about one other fundraising kind of lesson, and it took me a little longer than the average bear to get this, and once I did, then I really was very deliberate and very disciplined about it. And for any of you that have raised money, there are some people that will be very thoughtful about, yes, this is right for me, no, it's not right for me. And you move on. And there'll be others that will keep dragging you on and dragging you on and dragging you on. Time is money, right? We've got very limited time. We're tired. We've got 1,000,001 things to do. You just want somebody to basically say, yes, I'm interested, let's have another meeting and we'll either go further or not. But then you, instead of calling somebody, you almost want to say, let's not waste each other's time. I want to show you something I think you're really going to like. If you don't like it, understand, we all have our preferences, and we'll move on. And so I think that was a lesson I learned a little later than what I would have liked to, because it just, you want to be as efficient as possible. The other lesson, I think, again, I keep going back on the fundraising piece because it's just so true to the core of all of us, is I don't think fundraising ever stops, and so continually keep your book kind of going and don't lose focus on it. The other lesson, one position I think I would have hired right away, and Beth is in the back, and she'll remember one of my strategic advisors saying this to me. It was Lilac. And Amy, you need to hire a project manager. Now, she was on the product development side. You need to hire a project manager. No, the product development company is going to do that. Well, they don't. I mean, they do, but they don't. You know, they've got a lot of things on their plate. We've got something on our plate. It would have saved us a lot of time, a lot of money in the end. And it just keeps things on schedule. If you're running into an issue, you're going to either know you're going to either move on it. It's like a contractor for your house, right? They always take longer and they always take more money. And the problem with contractors, with most contractors for houses, is they're not project managers. And that's part of why it costs everybody more time and money. And so start off with whatever your business is and get somebody that's a real PMP, professional project management professional, and have them really keep you in line, because there's just so much going on in your world you can't.
Everyone looks pretty engaged. I just want to ask final call for questions.
Or I'm happy to stay around and answer.
Lee, you look like you, oh.
I'll talk about
Okay.
You're at $1 million. I have one more.
All right, go
You
for
can
it.
ask as many as you'd like.
I was just curious, you talked about the device going into the medical field as another segment of your market. Are you intending to target or create new markets like gynecologists and slaying that little piece of shit in?
So, in the space of sexual health, sexual wellness, personal lubricants, without going into the other, right, the baby or facial care, right, you're asking about this specific area. This was a learning for us, because Sonicare used dentists as their springboard. Clairsonic used estheticians and spas as their springboard. And we thought, great, we're going to use gynecologists as our springboard. And some of this really was reinforced because there's a couple of shows with gynecological professionals. One is called ACOG, the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and it's a very large show. And they had their first ever lube bar. And it was because they had introduced gynecologists to more lubricants, because it's like they don't care what they're using, many of them. They don't know what they're using, many of them. That's a whole nother discussion. Happy to go on about that with a further discussion. But it was a wow factor there. Then we went to NAMS, which is the North American Menopause Society. Now you're filtering it down to the cream of the crop of menopause OBGYNs or GYNs. And we had a table, we were like 3 deep the whole show. They'd do these lectures and they'd come out and they'd look at various booths. And Astroglide, of course, was there, and KY and all the major players. And so we just happened to be very, very fortunate in that the first lecture of the first day was about that topic of osmolality. Well, first of all, the people that are manning the booths at these other, it was a small show, manning the booths at this event, they had no idea what their osmolality is. But of course, you know, there's a big chart with me in the back that's sitting on my PC that's like, oh, 10,000 KY and 6,000 for Astroglide and blah, 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 blah. And we happened to be at 301, which was like, they just heard about this and they're clamoring around the booth and they're wanting to feel it. It was an international show. There were some doctors from, I am going to get your question, by the way, I'm sorry. There were some doctors from Scandinavia and from Brazil. And of course, we're not regulated yet to sell overseas for 2 reasons. One, you have to go through electronic certification, so we are for North American, but not European yet. And for personal lubricants, it's country by country regulatory. So they came over and they were like, look, we have to have this. We just have to have it. Can't you FedEx these in for us? I said, well, I can FedEx them in. I said, but you're going to have to go through customs and all that. We don't care. FedEx them in. There must have been 7 of them. We had to FedEx them in, FedEx in 6-packs, and I started getting emails, can you send us more 6-packs? No, I can't do that. I told you I couldn't do that. But we know the market is out there. But let me loop back now to your question. So naturally, that would have been the way to go. We're going to put devices in top-notch menopause doctors and let them experience it with their patients and then recommend their patients. So we started a recommender program. And what we found was that unless they were a concierge doctor, number one, time is money for them. It's almost like a lawyer, right? It's like the nurse pushes the button. It's like, how much are they going to bill? And they don't have time. So some thought it was cool, but we could tell, were they reordering or were they sending their patients our way? And if they weren't, we started this program slow so we could really monitor that. Now there's a doctor up on Pill Hill who happened to be my gynecologist for 20 years. She's in a large practice. They've got 4 of them up there now. We're always getting her patients. She loves it. So if anybody wants to go to Dr. Tracy Johansson, she'll have plenty in her practice. And their patients just love it. Plus we have an advisor now that I've just brought on in the last 6 months. Is Dr. Lauren Stryker. She has opened up the Center for Sexual Medicine and Menopause at Northwestern University Memorial Hospital. She is a top-notch concierge doctor. I mean, she sees the best of the best. I went up there to see the facility. It just opened in November. Beautiful mahogany floors. I mean, it is like, you know, you're going to a resort for your gynecological exam. Hello. So of course they want to have warming lubricant in there. But we need to be in a place like that. Otherwise, we're going to just, we may go to a show, introduce more doctors to it, but we're going to address it from the consumer side because it's just not cost effective. But that's how companies like Johnson & Johnson, well, it's Reckitt Benckiser, but KY that started with Johnson & Johnson, you know, they give these little packets. They're filled with all sorts of crap, but they're figuring, well, I'm using it once or twice a year for an exam, not on a regular basis. The hell with it. But you're using a lubricant on a regular basis. You should be treating your dearest parts as you are your organic food or anything else, or your baby's bottom. And in terms of the naturals, I mean, some people are like, oh, I just use coconut oil. Are you kidding? That's like great. Well, coconut oil is a fantastic antibacterial for your gut. But any of the oils, coconut oil, olive oil, avocado oil, any of those, they really shift your pH, your vaginal pH, and leads to BVs and yeast infections and all sorts of nasty stuff. Any other questions?
Well, you may have already answered this in that question, but as you do target some of these, you know, potential medicinal with the OBGYNs or the wound care or even the changing table, I believe you said it was nine servings in a pod. Wouldn't they potentially want more? So maybe
Yes, yes, and yes. Exactly where you're going is what we would do. So initially, we actually thought about when we go into each different category that we would kind of redesign the device, which is kind of shifted. But if you imagine this as the shape of a mouth and make it wider and put an animal facade around it, and you've got 2 portals and it's larger with natural baby lotions and diaper rash salve, and it becomes a comfort station. And now we not only have intelligent technology, because this light will change to yellow when there's 1 serving left, it'll change to red when you're out to change it out, and there's also I'm going to hold it for a second, a locking mechanism so no kids can get in and dispense or warm. When we go to the next iteration, it will have smart technology. So it is connected to your interconnected home. Alexa, could you please turn on the pulse in the nursery? Alexa, I would like this music, this lighting, start the pod warming, and oh yeah, could you order me 3 more sleeves of pods? So that's how we see this changing and growing with iterations.
Amazing. Well, that's a good note to end on. One more question, channeling Mike here. What was your first job, Amy?
First job. First job, I went to work on Wall Street for Bear Stearns, and I quit in 3 days.
Very good.
That was your very, very first job?
At a college. You mean my first
Okay, your
job?
first job.
First job, I was probably mowing lawns for the neighbors.
Okay.
Once a tomboy, always a tomboy. Yeah. Once my brother found out I could mow the lawn, by the way, that was the end of that. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. This is something you have to experience, so please come on up, chat with Amy. Thank you so much, Amy.